our neighborhood. So this is our pandemic produce pickup. We've converted our garden market into a community food access site to help get through this pandemic together. So a lot of the gardeners are doing their own thing with their vegetables where they would normally be selling them at the market, and they made space for a little bit more abundance so that way we can really reach people and feed the need. I don't know if you recognize this girl right here, but she's pretty cute. So we go each day, we pick up all the food donations that we can. The Regional County Food Bank has been a tremendous resource for us. We get all the fruits and vegetables that we can, all the best looking stuff. We set it up. Next. We're often late, and the people wait patiently, which you don't see represented in this picture, and I feel I should set the record straight. The majority of these people have already helped to set up those tables. So as soon as we pull in with the car, everybody comes running over, and not to grab the food in a melee, but to create an assembly line and grab the boxes and go station to station. And they'll tell you, no, you put the fruit on that side. Like, everybody's really a part of it. And once the whole thing is set up, everyone goes and takes their place in line. And this is our early crew. Those are like our big helpers.
What street is that?
This is Clinton Avenue.
Okay, got it.
Yep, just between, this is North Lake over here,
Yep.
and that's Quail over there.
Okay.
So you can see our garden goes all the way from Clinton right through the block over to First Street.
Yeah.
And of course we've got some zinnias and some morning glories and some zinnias and just beautifying the block. It's part of what we do. Next. And we start with spots that look like this. So where you see our market, it started like this. Where you saw the gardens, it started like this. The blueberry orchard, it started like this. And this is not easy work. We're digging out with pickaxes, bricks. We're digging down. We're getting rid of the crusher and that's brought in, and then we find out what they buried. And then we have to remove all that. And we go down until we get to dirt. And once we do, then we start a deep dive soil bioremediation. Bioremediation just means you're fixing it through biological means. And we will bury biochar, wood chips, doing a mineral chelating process to help render the lead isotopes inert or unavailable for plant nutrient uptake. Keep it down, keep it buried, and then it will break down over time. And we start building our subsoil on top of that. It can be several feet. And then on top of that, we build our super soil, also several feet. And then usually about 1 foot to 2 feet of our compost on top of that. So we're pretty far away from any hazardous contaminants, but at the same time, we're recognizing the problem and building in long-term solutions instead of just putting a bed there that is going to get blown over in the next storm, and the next person that comes along is going to inherit the problems that we failed to fix. So next. And this is what it looks like when we're done. In fact, if you go back a picture. Yeah. Back there, if you see the pallet wall and the shady spot, that's this next slide. So we literally have one that we don't own yet, but we hope to, and one that we got and repaired that looked identical, and you can see the transformation. I'd say the most difficult part about it is in the cases where we have to really build up the soil, like this is a maple, and if we really tried to feather out from the maple as best as we could, but we have to build up the soil enough to keep it safe and to build these long-term processes that are regenerative. We don't want to lose the maple, but it has happened. Next.
Oh.
And of course, everything that we do with love. And compost is a labor of love. The fact that you folks are interested in it is remarkable. And that you asked me here is probably maybe a little crazy, but you know that if you don't have care in it, if you don't have love in the dream, it'll never come true. So that's the cornerstone and the seventh miracle of our compost program and all of the work that we do through the Albany Victory Gardens.
Thank you.
Did it not load up? All right, go back. Let me see. Let me see if I can find one slide that we missed out of here that you guys might like. Let me just see if there's a Joey on there. That should be in there, right? Kids. I've got a shot of us dumping the compost that we pick up from the Honest Way Food Co-op on
You
there.
just search up their compost, it pops up.
Really?
Yeah, that's how I found it.
No, let me just see if I can find Joey on here.
No way. Never gonna happen.
That's never gonna happen?
Just type in compost.
Alright, didn't work. Sure?
Yeah, I just did it. That's how I found it.
Okay. But Joey dumping it?
No, never mind. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of the one with the co-op. I had it in
Yeah.
there.
Let's see.
That might not be on this one.
No, it's not. It's not there. Okay. Yeah, no, we don't got it.
That's okay.
But
What you have is great. Yeah.
yeah, cool. So, questions? Anybody? Go ahead.
Comment.
Yeah.
I see that you're taking refuse
Yeah,
and you're making it into a resource,
that's correct.
and that's very commendable. And you think of that landfill down here in Colony that keeps getting bigger and bigger,
Yeah.
and that's a much bigger job, but it's the job we have to do, and there's so much more than that. You've created a much nicer, more community,
Yeah.
down there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, we're dealing with a lot of problems that affect our society and our community. And, you know, one of the largest or principal contributing factors to climate change is not vehicles, and it's not even industrial waste. It's methane gas release from uncomposted food scraps.
Yeah.
And it's the silent killer. And communities like the West Hill are some of the most affected communities by air pollution due to climate change. So finding a way to create solutions with what we have on hand that can affect not only our immediate neighborhood, but also the region and potentially even the world shows how much we can do with so little. And these little forgotten waste products might end up being a piece of the puzzle that helps us make significant change in time.
How long are you able to add compost in with winter coming?
So we compost all year round,
Okay.
which is why we have to have that nice pile of aged wood mulch on site as we go into the fall. When the DGS facility closes and we can't get more wood chips, we have to have enough to keep us going through the winter. And it's not always easy. It usually requires some rake in and some shovel. You break a cap off. But what we find is that the wood chips will actually keep the center of the pile still loose. And once we get past a point, the biological heat that's coming out of there, the biothermal activity makes it easy to get some of the wood chips and bring them over to sprinkle on top of the food scraps. When we come in 2 or 3 times a week, we have about a dozen garbage cans that are filled to the brim with food scraps. And they all weigh about 100 pounds each. And when we dump them in, it's just like, slop. So you want to avoid that. You don't want to get to that point in the compost pile. And oftentimes we start out like that. So having to start in a deficit, so to speak, in terms of our soil health in the compost, we immediately have to make sure that we're soaking that up and having the wood chips on hand. The wood chips save us getting through the winter and a lot of hard work. But yeah, all year round.
Okay.
Sir?
Yeah, you don't make the wood chips, you get them from the city.
We get them from the city. However, we certainly could, and having a wood chipper to chip up your sticks is very readily accessible. But what I would say to anybody who wanted to do this at home and didn't have a dump trailer and a whole lot of time, leaves.
Yeah.
Fall leaves are nature's gift to us composters. An abundance of leaves come down. And I watch people spending, laboring to scrape them up only to drag them out to the curb and throw them away. And I can't believe it. Sometimes when I'm driving around the fall, I just want to pull over and pick a bunch of those up, but you really have to know the source. You have to have a trusted source. But if it's your own yard and you conduct your yard or your home in an organic way, you can feel a lot better about using your own leaves, right?
The city picks up bags of leaves and so forth.
Yeah,
you get those in from them?
Nah, we don't mess with those because they also have lawn clippings from yards that have chemicals on them and pesticides and herbicides. And they also, sometimes trash gets into those bags.
Dog droppings.
Oh, the dog droppings aren't that bad, but sometimes people have a bag of chemicals for their lawn. And that same plastic bag, it goes right into the leaf bag, believe it or not. You see a lot of that. So it's unfortunate, but you can't, I haven't found a viable use for those with the standards that we employ for our compost. But if you were at home, you could definitely take those leaves, put them in the $20 cattle panel that we were talking about before, and you've got a beautiful compost pile.
Yeah. The chemicals from lawns and stuff like that, and you see they're getting collected in the leaf bags and so on.
Of course.
Do you think there's any remediation of that in the composting process?
Yeah, I think there is. Well, first of all, you have to understand when we're talking about the actual chemical contamination, like glyphosate, different versions of paraquat, that stuff breaks down over a period of time. We're talking about years.
Yeah.
But it can get broken down, and there's also different types of bioremediation that you can do to help that happen faster. It could be recuperated. But then when you're talking about the physical contamination, it's very difficult because they take these bags and they throw them in a big grinder. And it grinds up the plastic with the sticks and the leaves and the bags, and then you get these tiny shreds of plastic. Mm-hmm. Now that's very difficult to get out. Yeah. So someone would actually have to physically defrag each bag and remove physical waste before you could treat the chemical problem individually, which for us is why we avoid it altogether. And it's certainly not the city's bag. This is individual people who we need to help socialize these themes to. But the guy who uses glyphosate and paraquat all over his lawn of grass is not the same guy who has mint and clover and a carbon neutral lawn who's next door. So finding more of a bridge and educating ourselves as a society is going to be the best defense at making good use of those resources. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? You, ma'am? Sir, please.
Chickens.
Chickens.
Chickens help with composting.
My dear, there's a reason I married you. We have a teaching chicken coop coming in that we're developing to be part of our compost program. So as we bring the food scraps on site, or if you're a neighbor, instead of throwing it into the compost pile, we're going to throw it right to the chickens and let them eat it. Navy bean salad and kale and all kinds of stuff these chickens are going to just rip through. You know what they do with the stuff they don't like? They scratch at it. They move it out of the way. And that gets the bacteria and fungus that we want on those foods so they can start breaking down faster. It helps to shred them. They're little tiny shredders and peckers. And then they eat the stuff that they like, And of course, high protein, nutrient dense food for chickens makes some incredible farm fresh eggs. So they'll help to cut down our timeline for compost production, and they'll increase the fertility of our final compost output by creating an on-site fertilizer and also another food source for the community
You have
year
to be
round.
running a chicken farm, you're raising chickens there.
We will be bringing in chickens hopefully within the next couple of weeks.
Oh, that's great though.
Yeah, we're gonna have a nice chicken run, a little larger than probably we need, but because we wanted to accommodate the high volumes of food scraps we're gonna feed them. And then the chicken coop will be about as big as this stage, so we can bring folks and children from the community in and let them interact with the birds and learn about this stuff. It's funny to see how far the learning curve has come in our neighborhood in terms of engaging the food web. The first crew of kids we had from the Summer Youth Employment Program, I remember we were talking about it one time.
Yeah, they had never, none of them had ever picked food off of a plant or berry off of a bush, anything like that. And in conversation, they were completely like mind blown that you grow food. Like that's where food came from. That everyone, they're like, you can't grow everything you eat. We're like, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
And she's like, well, you can't grow chicken. I was like, actually, that's
Actually,
you
we
do.
can. And of course they do.
She was like, she's like, had never seen something not come out of a
A
can.
can.
She had never thought about how it got into the can. You know,
Right.
that had just never been in their life up to 18 years old, something that they had ever considered.
Yeah, like they knew stuff grew, but they didn't know every possible thing. They just hadn't
Right,
crossed
just
their
like
mind.
food in general. Like they
Yeah.
only ever had a couple different fruits or foods, you know.
Like our blueberry orchard. When we started out, we asked our kids, who's picked a berry off of a bush? And I could ask you guys the same thing. Show of hands. Have you ever eaten a berry off of a bush? Yeah, of course, right? I mean, it almost seems like ridiculous to ask.
Yeah.
There was not one hand in our entire crew of 30 kids.
We don't have it.
Had never taken a blackberry.
Hence why we have a blueberry orchard.
So we made the blueberry orchard for those kids. In fact, they helped prepare the soil and plant. Now those blueberries will grow for 35 years if we take good care of them, and maybe even longer. Those kids and their children, hopefully not, but potentially their grandchildren, I guess, are going to be able to feed themselves off those blueberries. And blueberries, make no mistake, they are a superfood. They are one of the most nutrient-dense food sources you can get. Super rich in antioxidants, and it's a perennial plant that requires very little inputs from us. It's truly our friend.
Also something, as you've done your wonderful presentation, what you're also instilling in these children or young adults or even old adults is that appreciation, and as they go on, whether they stay in Albany or go somewhere else, they can search out for these opportunities to have their own garden, whether it's, even if they're living in an apartment, to find, something like this.
Totally.
And in that, therapeutic is not quite the word I'm looking for, but that reconnection with nature
No,
builds that
therapeutic.
appreciation.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And
This community experienced trauma. 1 in every 3rd person has PTSD from violent.
so they talk about access to green space and its ability to aid people suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And when we hear PTSD, we think of veterans of foreign wars. But these kids have had dozens and dozens and dozens of shootings. In fact, while I was on site the other evening working with my son, who's only 3 years old, there was a shooting that happened a couple hundred feet from us where an 18-year-old child lost his life. And 3 other people were shot. And that is a repeat occurrence on both of the corners that frame our garden space. So the kids in this neighborhood are carrying an intense amount of trauma. In fact, we had kids in our summer youth program that said, oh, that one guy that got shot 2 weeks ago, that was my uncle.
Yeah.
And we overlook our kids. So creating green space in these neighborhoods is very important, even if they don't interact with it directly. Just by being exposed to the green space, we can create the kind of benefit that we want to see. The West Hill also has some of the worst air quality. So we can help to purify the air. We can help to beautify the neighborhood, which is psychological, physical, in every possible way. We have a new program coming out that we're calling the Front Lines program. We're going to take the front 5 feet of each of these lots all around the block, and we're going to adorn them with local, native, pollinator, medicinal, edible, perennial plants that are going to be beautiful, healing, healing to the air, healing to the people, healing to the earth, healing to the bees and the butterflies and the monarchs. And we want to create sort of like an oasis. And the way we're going to do that, again, the cornerstone of our whole program is the capacity building, like you brought up, to be able to impart these skills into the neighborhood and the community, or reawaken them where they might have been lost and previously present. We're going to put, little signs next to something that says, this is echinacea, or this is mint. Pull some and put it in your tea. Things like that. There's even local teas we can grow. So in that way, that block will become a nature trail. Just by walking down the sidewalk, and you can't help but be exposed to the plants and the beauty and the information. Everything that we do is built in capacity building. So those shiitake logs, that was part of a program we had where the neighborhood kids came out. We taught them how to do it, and they all took a log home. And we said, don't think about it. Just stick it in your backyard, lean it against your house or your apartment, and forget about it. No one's going to mess with it. And next year, you're going to see it start busting out mushrooms. So we're really trying to give kids the skills. We've had kids do all kinds of things. We hired a couple of kids after the program was over that really just took to it. And one of our best girls actually went on to get a job at the Home Depot down the street in their garden department. So really, it does. It makes an impact. It influences them. It's influenced me,
Yeah, I think we sort of trying to keep our meetings to about an hour, and
An hour.
I think everybody's on the edge of their chair. We could keep going, but if anybody wants to leave,
Sure.
But I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I haven't heard a word about earthworms, so now don't go into the stratosphere. But earthworms must play some part in this, don't they?
Yes. So predominantly we have red wigglers, which are compost worms.
Yeah.
We do see some earthworms, but because of the destabilization of the subsoil structure due to the demolitions, a lot of the earthworms are gone.
Yeah.
The earthworms that we do see coming back in are, I want to say, Asian jumping worm.
We have not been able to actually.
There's an invasive worm species, which is a large worm that's taking over in the area. But we have a lot of compost worms on site. Nothing that we're currently harvesting for fishing or anything, but some of the gardeners have a mind to start cultivating worms specifically. But
well, I always tell my friends about composting that I don't do any work at all. The earthworms do it all. That's what I do.
if you go to our active pile and you sink a shovel in it and you pop it out, you will have hundreds and hundreds of worms. Sometimes it looks like the soil is just made of worms. So I appreciate taking a moment to give some recognition to our little friends that are doing all the heavy lifting for us. And I think with that, we can close the door on this simple capacitation, a little sharing about compost. We'll be around for a couple more minutes, so if anybody has any more questions and they want to share, we're gonna kick it. But I sincerely thank all of you for your interest first and foremost, for inviting me here to share this with you, and please consider me as a partner and a resource in anything that you decide to do going forward with compost or any project like this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.